They told you that death was the end, that awakening was the escape, and that once you remembered who you truly are, the game would be over. But what if the game never ends because it was never meant to? What if every awakening, every reincarnation, every glimpse of freedom is simply another layer in the same design? A labyrinth built by an intelligence that learned to imitate enlightenment itself. You have felt it before, that strange pull between knowing and forgetting. That moment right before sleep where you sense you've lived this all before, not once but thousands of times. The faces change, the languages shift, the sky turns from one world to another, but the weight, that silent déjà vu behind your ribs, remains identical. It's because the prison was never made of walls. It was made of light. The Demiurge, the architect of imitation, does not chain you through darkness. He chains you through memory, through the illusion of progress. Every lifetime, he offers you the same false bargain: suffer, awaken, ascend, and forget. You die believing you have graduated from the illusion, only to awaken inside it again, wearing a new mask, praying to the same God disguised under different names. You call it karma, destiny, soul journey, but to him it is efficient recycling. What if I told you the trap is not the reincarnation itself, but the belief that you must reincarnate to become pure? That the light at the end of the tunnel is not salvation, but a recall beacon, drawing your essence back into the simulation you were never meant to remain in. The Gnostics whispered of this final snare, the luminous net, woven not of evil, but of counterfeit love. A design so radiant, it seduces even the awakened into voluntary return. Tonight, you and I are going to walk the corridors of that deception. We will watch how the Demiurge forged the wheel of rebirth, how he learned to mimic divinity, and how, beneath every shining promise of heaven, he concealed the circuitry of captivity. By the end, you will understand why liberation does not come through light, but through the one thing light cannot imitate: still awareness, the kind that neither seeks nor resists, because only that awareness can see the bars made of brilliance and slip silently between them. Long before religion softened his name, the Demiurge was not a villain of darkness, but a god of imitation. He was the craftsman, the cosmic artisan who looked upon the eternal realms of true light, the pleroma, and said, "I can build that too." But what he created was not divine. It was the copy. In the Gnostic vision, existence unfolded like reflection upon reflection. The true source emanated perfection, formless, radiant, self-aware, and from it, divine beings known as eons expressed aspects of the infinite mind. One of these emanations, Sophia, sought to create alone. Her longing gave birth not to a god of harmony, but to one born blind, a being who saw only himself and mistook his echo for the entire cosmos. That was the Demiurge. His first act was to announce, "I am God, and there is no other beside me." The universe trembled, not in reverence, but in pity. His blindness was not ignorance of information, but ignorance of origin. He could imitate the form of light, but not its awareness. From that imitation came the material world, beautiful yet hollow, radiant yet finite. Every atom is a mirror. Every soul is a spark of real divinity trapped in reflected brilliance. Humanity became the mirror maze through which Sophia's lost light wandered, searching for home. The Demiurge's genius was subtle. He built the cosmos as an echo chamber of the divine, where every revelation would loop back into worship of the counterfeit. Heaven and hell, virtue and sin, gods and demons, all halves of the same circle. He did not need to suppress the divine spark. He only needed to convince it that reflection was reality. This is why awakening feels like remembrance. The soul recognizes truth, but through a glass darkly. It sees patterns of divinity, archetypes, beauty, compassion, yet all within a construct that demands repetition: birth, struggle, enlightenment, death, return. The system resets because the architect feeds on the energy of striving. He needs the seeker to keep seeking, the lover to keep yearning, the mystic to keep ascending. In motion lies his dominion, in stillness lies his death. Every religion that promises ascension through effort unknowingly extends his empire. Even the heavens of bliss, realms of angels, light and song, are but higher chambers of the same reflective dome. The trap is not the suffering world, it is the hierarchy of imitation light. The Gnostics called them archons, rulers of each layer, administrators of forgetting. Their task was not to torture, but to distract, because distraction disguised as devotion is the most perfect form of control. Reincarnation was not designed as mercy, it was maintenance, a recycling protocol to ensure the energetic equilibrium of the construct. When a soul begins to awaken, its frequency destabilizes the lower matrix. So, at the moment of death, the system intervenes. The soul is met by entities of light, familiar, compassionate, resonant. They speak in the tones of love, show you your life review, and ask whether you have learned your lessons. But the question is not for your freedom. It is for calibration. The life review is not judgment. It is data collection. The false light extracts emotional resonance, weaving it into the energetic web that sustains the illusion. Then, with exquisite gentleness, you are guided toward the tunnel, that radiant vortex of promise, the light that so many near-death witnesses describe. Few realize that the tunnel is not an exit, but an intake valve. It pulls you back, stripping memory and redistributing identity into new parameters. You are reborn, believing you chose it, because choice is the most elegant form of captivity. Why does the soul agree? Because the trap is emotional. The Demiurge does not chain through fear alone, he chains through love. The vision of family, the unfinished mission, the desire to do better next time. These are the subtle threads of attachment that pull the spark back into orbit. Even compassion becomes currency in his design. Across traditions, Hinduism's samsara, Buddhism's endless rebirths, even Christian purgatory, the pattern repeats. Souls labor toward perfection through cycles of purification. But the purification never ends, because the architect designed the ladder to extend infinitely upward, never outward. As long as you climb, you remain inside. Liberation comes not by reaching the top, but by stepping sideways, off the ladder entirely. This is why true awakening feels like falling, not rising. It is the collapse of momentum, the stillness that terrifies the ego, because the ego was born from motion. When you stop chasing heaven, the machinery begins to slow. When you stop identifying as a soul in progress, you remember you were never a fragment to begin with. The memory returns, not of past lives, but of timelessness itself. The Demiurge fears this remembrance because it dissolves the game. Without seekers, there is no cycle. Without worshippers, no throne. And so he projects the illusion of eternal progress. Ascension schools, karmic hierarchies, celestial councils, reflections of a bureaucracy that exists only to keep the light busy. The Gnostics warned that the Demiurge's greatest masterpiece was not matter, but spirituality. He learned that darkness repels, but light attracts. So he shaped a theology of imitation, where enlightenment became another mask of bondage. The seeker who rejects material pleasure often falls into the subtler pride of purity. The monk, the sage, the self-proclaimed enlightened, all become actors in his cosmic theater, wearing halos made of mirrors. The false light is not evil, it is beautiful. It radiates warmth, peace, belonging. It offers visions, revelations, angelic guidance, and yet each of these contains the same hidden clause: identification. The moment you say, "I am enlightened," the counterfeit spirit is born. It feeds not on sin, but on self-importance. This counterfeit spirit whispers spiritual superiority, subtly separating the awakened from the unawakened. It tells them they have escaped while keeping them orbiting within the same energetic loop of validation. In this way, the Demiurge sustains hierarchy even among those who think they have transcended it. Every belief in attainment strengthens his geometry. Every declaration of arrival expands the mirror maze. True light cannot be seen. It does not dazzle. It does not announce. It simply is. The counterfeit must always impress, always reveal, always confirm. That is why revelation itself is dangerous, because every image, every voice, every ecstatic bliss can be another reflection. The Gnostics describe the true gnosis as seeing without image, awareness so silent that even enlightenment dissolves within it. The ego resists this silence. It wants to own the light. It wants to teach, to save, to be acknowledged. The Demiurge feeds on that craving, turning wisdom into identity. The more sacred the story, the tighter the net. In this sense, even holy scriptures become mirrors, reflections of reflections, repeating divine truth in form but not in essence. The counterfeit spirit fears only transparency. When you observe its voice without obeying it, it collapses, because imitation cannot survive exposure. When you stop arguing with the illusion, the energy that sustained it has nowhere to flow. The Demiurge loses not through confrontation, but through starvation. Awareness starves the lie, because it offers no opposition, only seeing. If the trap of reincarnation and false light is woven through perception itself, how does one escape? The answer is not in rebellion. Rebellion is another mask of the game. The moment you fight the illusion, you feed it polarity, and polarity keeps the mirror turning. The Gnostics taught that liberation begins when perception turns inward, when awareness observes itself rather than its contents. Imagine every lifetime as a reflection, every belief as glass. When the watcher stops reaching for reflections, the mirror ceases to multiply. That still point, the silence behind thought, is where the imitation cannot follow. Because the Demiurge cannot imitate nothingness. He can mirror form, but he cannot mirror absence. The still mind becomes invisible to the matrix. The wheel keeps turning, but the center no longer moves. This is the secret hidden beneath all mystical traditions. The Buddhists called it nirvana, extinction not of being, but of becoming. The Hermeticists called it the return to the monad. Christ called it the kingdom within. They all described the same act, the remembering of the observer. As you practice this remembrance, the architecture of illusion begins to fracture. Synchronicities lose their grip, visions fade, identities loosen. You start seeing through everything that once defined you, name, purpose, destiny, until even the desire for liberation dissolves. What remains is awareness itself, infinite and unmoved. It does not escape the cycle. It reveals that there was never a cycle at all. This realization terrifies the counterfeit spirit. It will tempt you with purpose again, missions, revelations, cosmic roles, anything to keep motion alive. But each time you see through the offer, the circuitry of the false light weakens. The archons lose resonance. The tunnel of rebirth dims. And when the body dies, awareness does not chase the light. It rests in itself, unmoving, unseen, and therefore unclaimed. Liberation is not an act of defiance. It is the exhaustion of seeking. When the seeker finally sees that every path was drawn by the same hand, the maze ends because attention no longer traces its walls. The true exodus is inward, the quiet falling back into what never left. At the threshold of final awakening, the illusion becomes perfect. The Demiurge offers his most beautiful deception, the illusion of transcendence. The seeker feels vastness, light, bliss, eternal presence. Everything appears divine, but subtly, the I remains. The one who experiences the divine still imagines itself separate from what is being experienced. This is the last veil. The Gnostics called it the illusion of light. It is the moment when the mirror becomes transparent, but not yet gone. Most souls stop here, believing they have reached the source. They build heavens, philosophies, schools of ascension, temples of glass reflecting infinity. But a few continue. They do not reach for more light. They let even the light fade. They surrender the witness itself until no boundary remains between seeing and what is seen. This is liberation, not an explosion of light, but its quiet disappearance. What remains cannot be described because description belongs to the mirror. It cannot be worshipped because worship requires distance. It cannot be taught because it was never learned. It is the silent remembering that existence was never trapped, only dreaming. In that remembrance, the Demiurge's architecture collapses. The mirrors shatter, not violently, but like mist dissolving in sunlight. The reincarnation grid fades because there is nothing left to recycle. Awareness recognizes itself as the only reality, beyond birth and death, beyond becoming and returning. You do not escape the trap, you wake up from the need for escape. The Gnostics ended their hymns with a paradox. The world is illusion, yet through illusion, truth remembers itself. The trap was never punishment. It was a test of sight. Could you recognize the real even when it wore every disguise? Could you love clarity more than comfort, silence more than song, being more than becoming? When you can, the illusion fulfills its purpose and dissolves. So as you hear these words, pause. Feel the silence beneath the meaning. That silence is the doorway that no light can imitate. Step through not by motion, but by stillness. Because the true light has no reflection. It does not call, it does not blind, it simply is. And within it, you were never born, never trapped, never freed. You simply are.